is our Space, the Final Escape panel. I'm Maryelizabeth Yturralde of Mysterious Galaxy here in San Diego. And thank you. I'm going to be introducing our panelists. I'll have a few questions for the panel, and then we'll open it up to questions from the floor. If you have questions on the floor, we have a microphone set up for you to go to and ask questions. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Andy Weir.
Hello.
Andy built a career as a software engineer until the runaway success of his debut novel, The Martian, allowed him to pursue writing full-time. He's a lifelong space nerd and a devoted hobbyist of subjects such as relativistic physics, orbital mechanics, and the history of manned spaceflight. He lives in California, and his forthcoming book is ARTEMIS. And Claudia Gray. Claudia is the New York Times bestselling author of many science fiction and paranormal fantasy books for young adults, including Defy the Stars and its upcoming sequel, Defy the Worlds. The Firebird series, the Evernight series, the Spellcaster series, and Fateful. She's also had a chance to work in a galaxy far, far away as the author of Star Wars novels, Lost Stars, and Bloodline. And I'm going to step to the side for a second because I am representing Claudia's work as well. So, welcome, Claudia. So, our next two people are one author, and despite that, and yet you're also like 5 authors, if we want to get into detail, because
distributed identity is weird.
It is. It is. Despite all of that, they have one of the shortest bios of any authors that I tend to work with. James S.A. Corey is the pen name of fantasy authors Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. They both live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and their relevant work for this panel is the Expanse series. Sorry, scrolling. Panelists never get seated in the order that I have their bios. And our last panelist is guest of the convention, Nathan Hale. Nathan is a superstar in elementary school libraries across the country. He's been nominated for an Eisner Award 4 times. The books in the Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales series have spent time on the New York Times bestseller list and made it to #1, which is pretty exciting for nonfiction comics about American history. And his first non-history graphic novel was inspired by Mobius, and it's a science fiction adventure, One Trick Pony. Welcome, Nathan. So, the concept of space in this course of this conversation is going to be pretty expansive, unsurprisingly. Our author's works.
That's what you did there.
I like wordplay. Our author's works are set on Earth, on the moon, in galaxies far, far away, in the past, in the future, in all sorts of environments, all of which kind of fall under that collective umbrella. So we are going to be talking about scrolling once again, a variety of things. The first thing that I thought of when I was coming into this was, I'm curious about what your personal mythology of thinking about space and interacting with it is. Like, I realized mine kind of goes Marvin the Martian, the moon landing, War of the Worlds, R is for Rocket, and then other stuff. So what first drew you to science fiction and space as a passion? Any of you?
I mean, for me, and those of you at the Star Wars panel yesterday might have already heard this, but I went to see Star Wars at age 7, and that pretty much shattered my relationship with reality just right there. It was over. And of course, now this is space as seen by George Lucas, which means that, like, I mean, canonically, there is oxygen-consuming fire in outer space. So it's maybe not like outer space as it actually exists. But I think once you get interested even in the fantasy, then you get much more interested in the reality as well. And I just remember being fascinated with all aspects of it, whether it was as fantastical as that or learning more about the moon landings and things like this. I was always interested in it from then on.
So I just learned that Claudia and I are exactly the same age.
She watched the re-release, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Nice save. But, I mean, Star Wars obviously was a big deal, and I'd grown up watching Star Trek, but the first show that actually made me think about space, because Star Trek and Star Wars don't feel like they're actually taking place in space. The one that actually made me feel like the show was set in space was Space 1999. I don't know if you guys remember that show.
Martin Landau.
The spaceships looked like stuff we would build for space. The Eagle is still my favorite spaceship of all time. And if they went outside on the moon, they died. Sometimes their station would break and the air would go out and the people in it would die. And it was the first time I'd never seen that on Star Trek. The air never goes out of the Enterprise and everybody dies. So that was the first time I was like, oh, space is a character in itself, and can be an interesting character. So that was really pretty much it. And Walter Koenig just died, and I was very sad.
Oh.
No, not Walter Koenig.
Don't listen to him.
Sorry. Somebody else.
Don't do that.
Somebody else.
Somebody else just died.
Martin
Who was not
Landau?
Walter
Martin Landau.
Koenig.
Thank you.
Walter Koenig is fine.
Walter Koenig
is totally fine.
He's fine.
For some reason, those two names occupy the same space in my brain.
Like 80 people just tweeted that. Now there's an internet death hoax.
Martin
Rest in
Landau
peace.
from Space 1999.
We should all take a moment
Wow.
for William Shatner.
Anton
Yeah.
Yelchin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ty was just operating in the wrong alternate reality. Be gentle.
Yeah, we just switched places. Sorry about that.
I can't top that.
That's okay, you're one person anyway. Just move on to that.
Actually, I will put a yeah.
That was great timing. Thank you.
Been better timing.
I will put in a kind word for the science fiction novelists and short story writers in the 1970s. I mean, I had the same experience with Star Trek and Star Wars and filmed entertainment. But the first time I really had my brain kind of blown out to the side of my head by a story was The 9 Billion Names of God by Arthur Clarke. And you're right? And I was about 12 when I read that, and I remember where I was sitting when I finished it because it was like that moment in my life. And yeah, I lived in the worlds of Larry Niven and Harry Harrison, and those relationships for me are deeper because I spent so many more hours just imagining and inhabiting that experience. And you know, those were important to me.
I have an explanation. His character's name was Commander Koenig on Space 1999.
There you go.
So that's why those two names are connected in my head.
Okay.
Commander Koenig, played by Martin Landau. Yes.
But more characters died during the course of the show than the entire population of Alpha Base.
Oh yeah, of course.
And the moon is not near Earth anymore. They have no way to restock. So it's actually
They had a clone lab you just never saw.
yeah, apparently. Yeah.
I was books too. My dad was a big science fiction reader, and he would take me to the library, and he'd say, "All right, here's how you find the good books. There's a sticker It's a green sticker with a planet on it. It's on the spine. Go through. If you can't find one of those, there's a sticker with a unicorn. That's okay too. And just don't even worry about the ones without a sticker. So that's what I grew up on. You mentioned Larry Niven. Larry Niven was my guy. My dad was like, here, we're going to start with Ringworld, and we're going to go up through the Ringworld engineers. And Ringworld's pretty mind-blowing stuff when you're a 12-year-old kid. There's all kinds of crazy space sex and stuff. And it would be weird to read a book my dad had just read and be like, my dad want me to read this?
Well, for me, it was also books, and for me, it was also books that kind of came from my dad. My dad was an avid sci-fi dork, and he had an infinite collection of like juvenile sci-fis from the 50s and 60s. So what's weird is I grew up reading the sci-fi of baby boomers, even though I'm like Gen X. So I grew up reading Heinlein and Asimov and Clarke and stuff like that. So they're the books like Tunnel in the Sky and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress and stuff like that. And those are the things that really got me into it.
So sort of jumping off of something that Ty mentioned, which is thinking about what the environment that you're creating would be. So what, if anything, were everyday activities where you had to catch yourself and be like, okay, they're not going to casually take a shower in running water and flip off the electricity? What are things that you sort of have to think about when you're world building and putting your people in the environment and making sure that it's correct to that environment, not to your regular experience?
Well, I'll go first, randomly. Well, so I had it was pretty easy for me on The Martian because it's all, I mean, it's pretty well documented what astronauts have to deal with in the day-to-day life. But what was a much bigger and much more fun challenge for me was Artemis, which is a city on the moon. And it's basically anything that you have to bring up from Earth is extremely expensive. Anything you can recycle or reuse on the moon is a normal amount of expense. So it's things like the shower, like you mentioned. Like when you shower on the moon, you have about 20 liters of fresh water to shower with, and then it just starts recycling the water for you. So the water that goes down the drain gets reheated and put there. So the idea is you first do all your cleaning and then let that set of water go away, and then you can just soak in the shower as long as you want. It just keeps putting the same water back on you. And that's but it's not like they're importing the water from Earth. It's just but the purification of the water costs a lot more because it's not just raining and falling down out of the sky like it is here. Those sorts of things. It's a lot of fun to think about that stuff. And like, if you want a condom, that costs a lot of money. Seriously, it's like, they don't have any means of manufacturing latex on the moon. They don't have any like fossil fuels or anything to work with.
Trying to think what fines would do to a condom now. That's a terrible idea. I'm sorry to have thought that.
What's that?
Think about what fines would do to a condom now. Like I'm thinking about on the moon. There's no erosion, so all of the dirt is very sharp.
It's very barbed
and barbed and
yeah,
terrible.
So I hadn't put a lot of thought into crunchy sandpaper sex, but thanks for putting that in my mind.
And yet you brought the condom. I mean,
I know.
The panel has taken a turn.
Well, within Artemis, they have to put a lot of work into keeping those fines from getting into the city. Otherwise, everyone gets lung cancer. It's like mesothelioma. Seriously, that's what you'd get.
It's different for me based on what I'm working on with the Defy the World series. It's set about 300 years in the future, and it is a time when Earth essentially is dying, and there are some colony worlds, but most of these are not ideal habitats for humans. But there's incredible pressure because the population's got to go somewhere. And so I had to sort of figure out what the challenges of each of these planets and each of these environments would be. And I don't have a science background, but I'm lucky enough to have friends who do, and I was talking about one planet that was cold, not beyond human existence, but certainly uncomfortably and dangerously cold. And I was talking about the fact they had a lot of industry there, and my friend Marina, who is an oceanographer, how great is that? Yeah, she...
Well, we've got a American history writer named Nathan Hale.
Yeah, I know. Right. Sometimes God just tells you. But she immediately said greenhouse gases. And I realized the exact same gases that are so damaging here, they would be creating that on purpose, at least for a short time, on this world, so that it would heat up over the next century or so and become more comfortably habitable. Now, with Star Wars, it's a whole different thing because other people have constructed that universe, and you just have to think like you're in it. And, like one time I was talking about, and they have a hangar connected to their house, and they're like, why would there be a hangar? There are all these regulations, et cetera. I'm like, not in Star Wars. In Star Wars, a hangar's like your garage. It's really ordinary.
And in Star Wars, it's very, very difficult to copy data.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in that world, you...
Get the floppy, run with the floppy.
I had a friend of mine I'm a dork, but my friends are dorks. We play role-playing games, and we had a role-playing game that took place in the Star Wars setting, and he said, look, this is not the universe we're in. In this universe, it is very, very difficult to copy data. So if somebody hands you a thing that has data on it, you have to take the thing somewhere. You can't just email it. Mm-hmm. You've got... And that's how it is.
77@yahoo.com.
Yeah.
Don't open that.
No, there is clearly no internet in the Star Wars universe.
Right.
They never invented
no internet.
that.
Yeah. Also, Data's Star Trek.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said Data's Star Trek.
Oh, God.
Especially in the original series, they're like going at warp 9, and Mr. Spock takes the little disc across the bridge and puts it in.
Yeah. Right. Or, it's like, computer, go through the database and find me all instances of like something that Google could do in 0.2 seconds, and it's like working.
Either James, both James, simultaneous James.
We think a lot about food. How you make it. What it turns into when you're done with it, because we have a lot of orbital. Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, Andy's done some work on that topic himself. Yeah, no, we mine the same fields sometimes, but yeah, I mean, if you're living on an asteroid base, the topic of where you get food and what you do with the byproduct of eaten food is a serious thing. I mean, obviously you don't go into great detail in a book if you want anyone to read it, but unless you're Andy. But yeah, I mean, those little details make the world feel much realer, when everybody's eating like processed yeast.
Well,
he can use words like realer because he's a professional author.
Professional.
Don't try this at home.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
he gets paid for reeler.
Right.
No, the other thing that I think, at least in the project we were working on, The Expanse, is trying to keep track of what inertia would do. We've got a tremendous amount of credit for just noticing that if you go faster, you wind up feeling it like you're in an elevator. Just understanding an elevator, I think, is the base of our career.
I have to worry about what everything looks like because I'm a graphic novelist, so I have to draw everything. And I have to always make the hard choice between does it look usable or does it look cool? Right? And it's just an ongoing back and forth. If we had robots, what would they really look like? If we had all of these futuristic space items, would they be minimal or would they be all crazy and spiny, or would everything just kind of look like various sizes of iPhone? Right.
So that leads to, as you're introducing new elements, whether it's aliens, whether it's technology, whatever it is, what is your preferred methodology of introducing it? Do you just have... And Leia walks up and says to her subordinate officer, operate the widget, and then everybody figures out what the widget is by context? Or do you draw it so we know what it is if you're Nathan? Or how do you introduce a foreign concept to your readers?
Well, it kind of depends on whether the foreign concept is foreign to the characters. If the characters are coming across something new, then it makes sense for them to talk about it and think about it and analyze it and be there with the audience while they figure it out. If it's something that is mundane to them, it kind of has to be picked up from context. You can't, say, well, I'm getting into my automobile, which, as you know, involves internal combustion, though we are now moving to an electrical version. That's poor form.
It's really frustrating sometimes. It's like, look, I wish I could just read this page of exposition, and I'm just going to make it a Wikipedia article for you. And then I can go like 100 pages without having to do it, right? But you can't do that. And what's worse is you're really tempted to try to sneak it into dialogue, but it doesn't work,
No, you should totally do it as a Wikipedia page. That would be awesome.
Yeah. just have hot links in your book. No, but it's like,
The evolution of the book is happening on this panel.
Yeah. But it's really frustrating because, characters don't talk about things that all of the characters know. I don't go, oh, Maryelizabeth, as you know, we live in a country that has a bicameral legislature, and it's like we don't.
So now we're on Nathan's history?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's really frustrating. For the little things, I try to do it from context. I also have the advantage of a first-person narrator, which is kind of the only way I write. So the first person, I can just kind of break the rules a little bit, and they just describe it to you.
Yeah, for me, I usually try, at least with the Defy the Stars series, there's a mixture of the things that the characters will be familiar with and what they won't. So that, yes, I'm having to stop and explain things here and there, but other concepts we just have to take and understand that they work the way that they work, which is a shame because at least one of those was one of the things I thought was the most interesting. I got to go to a conference a few years ago where I was hearing some astronauts speak, and they were talking about the future of space flight, and they said one thing that had held back, like the speed at which a ship can travel is the heat of ignition, because at a certain point you will melt the metal and your spaceship is not working so great anymore. And the theory was to create a kind of engine where the walls for this would actually be magnetic fields, electrical fields, and that would hold this. And I was like, that is the coolest thing I have ever heard in my whole life. And also, it would make it look like you had oxygen-consuming fire in outer space. So they use them in Defy the Worlds, but they just go, oh, they're mag engines, and that's it, and that's it. Because everybody in that universe would know what those are and would rely on them, and it would be completely uneventful to them. Whereas the steps that are taking on the planets, that's something that we get to talk through. So as long as you're not having to explain everything every step of the way, it's a little easier.
Oh, also, I try not to spend a lot of time explaining things I don't actually understand.
Yeah.
So the Samuel Delaney theory of there's a thing in the basement that does what it needs to, moving on.
Yes.
Yeah, also, I've also found that it helps if there's some exposition you're going to have to drop in there and you can't avoid it. It's really great to have a character with a big ego. Because that's exactly the person who's going to explain the stuff. Oh. Because he's going to brag about, look what I did, and everybody's like, yes, we know what you did.
The guy who's like, well, actually, mag engines.
Yeah. Exactly, that guy. Every once in a while, if you have that character, you can get in some stuff. It is in character for that person to do that.
Nathan?
I'm spoiled because I get to draw everything, and a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? In my book, One Trick Pony, it's about an Earth that's been invaded by aliens. The aliens have harvested the Earth using bubbles that take valuable minerals and technology, but turn everything else into sand, right? Now, that's a big mouthful, but when you draw it, you go, oh, like that, right? So one of my favorite special effect growing up was one of the most subtle special effects in a James Cameron movie. It was in Terminator 2, when the Terminator travels through time in the sphere, not the lightning and all of that stuff. I didn't care about that. I cared about when the bubble disappears and the ground has that little bowl in it and the edge of the truck is cut off. But you can just see the edge that there was a sphere there. And in this book, I wanted to envision what it would be like if millions of bubbles like that happened everywhere. And in a novel, you'd have to just keep explaining, oh, and by the way, the landscape looked real Swiss cheesy, you know.
Yeah.
But in a graphic novel, you can draw that in every panel and show the different way that the spheres would cut into things, stuff like that. So I'm spoiled with the drawing.
So speaking of losing everything to aliens who eat our technology and our electricity or living elsewhere, for your works, either what is a piece of technology that you've developed that you're really in love with, like I wish I had this now, or if you were living in your world that you've created, what's a piece of technology that does exist that you would really miss? I'm guessing internet for Star Wars.
Yeah, I can't just say the Millennium Falcon.
Well, all the technology in my books actually exists. So I didn't get to really make up anything, but I could say that, like, you know, in Artemis, there's a commercial space industry that, through competition, has driven the price to low Earth orbit down, 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 to the point where middle-class people can afford to go into space. So if the technology that I'm grabbing and wish I could live with is, if I'm allowed to use an economic technology, then yeah. A commercial space industry that middle-class people can afford to use.
Mysterious Galaxy will be happy to host your first book signing on the moon.
Oh, seems reasonable. I mean, I won't be there, but have fun.
It's not sexy or exciting, but we have ubiquitous, safe, very effective fusion reactors all over our world, and boy, that would solve a lot of problems.
Oh, that'd be so awesome.
We also had trivial cancer treatments. We also have, one of the things we were talking about was if you're going to be spending a lot of time in outer space, a lot of time outside of a magnetosphere, you should probably figure out how to deal with tumors. So in order to make it kind of plausible for us that we had a civilization out in the rest of the solar system, we had to upgrade the drugs.
I don't know for sure whether I really would want this technology or not, but I think it's interesting. One thing that in DEFY the Stars that gets explored through the series is there's an ambition basically to upload consciousness, to create a kind of afterlife, and how much of that person remains or doesn't remain is very much an open question and something that's getting investigated. I don't know if I would necessarily want that. I don't know if I want to live on forever as, like, you know, the virus in your computer, but it would be a really interesting technology to explore. Let's put it that way. I would be interested to see it and make somebody else go first.
I think in that particular technology's case, that making someone else go first would be murder.
Well, no, but no, not making them go first. So, but there's always going to be somebody who's like, I will do it. And you're like, okay.
I got a robot pony. I'll take
Sweet.
one of those.
She is an awesome robot pony. All right, so I'm now going to open to questions from the floor. So if you have questions for our panelists, please go to the mic and we'll get through as many as we can.
So I'm in the Navy. I've worked on an aircraft carrier, which is kind of the closest thing you get to a spaceship here on Earth. You know, they'll sometimes send us out to sea for 120 days at a time. We get underway replenishments while we're out there. So how in space, do you guys have companies that will come up alongside the ships and, like, provide them with new stuff and take away anything they can't recycle? Or have you thought about that at all, about how to do all of the resupplies?
Yeah, I've put some thought into how to deal with food in space. So have they, by the way. I mean, well, in the case of the Martian, he rather famously grows his own. But in like Artemis, it's a big deal. Food is imported from Earth, but also that's expensive, even if it's like freeze-dried stuff like that. So what most of the kind of common rank and file people eat on Artemis is what they call gunk, which is capitalized. It's a brand name, and it's just algae. So they grow it in vats. And it's just algae, and then they import little flavor extracts from Earth to make it taste kind of palatable.
Yeah, in Defy the Stars, it's not as immediate as that, but it's a real issue because you do have all these spacecraft and these colony worlds, but food is becoming a scarcity item because very few of these colony worlds are really set up to grow anything like the kind of supplies that billions of people need to survive. And so this is almost sort of weirdly cult-like here. I'm impressed. Like, y'all are sort of striking poses. This is good. If you have like arm movements.
It's like an album cover.
Yeah. We are now in the new OK Go video.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was less getting into the mechanics of it and more getting into what that's going to do to a society when food is becoming rapidly the most valuable thing that's out there.
So this is for the two James Coreys with, sorry, I didn't catch the full names to address
It's all
you.
right. We'll print for anything.
So in the Expanse series, aside from the alien thing that appears in the first book, are we dealing? Well, I just can't remember the name. Are there sentient aliens that may appear at some point in the future, or are we going to essentially be dealing with humans, the Martians that appear human, essentially in the book as well?
I mean, you're going to have to keep reading the books.
They're not going to tell you that.
A lot of things could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. We got 2 more books coming. We'll get there. I promise.
3 more.
3. Well, 2 more we have to write. 3 more we have to publish.
This is mainly for the Jameses, but also for the other folks on the panel. How do the two of you divide up the work you do together? And for the rest of you, have you collaborated with other authors and brainstorm technology between the other people you've worked with?
Okay, I'm going to tell you the secrets to our collaboration. So yeah, don't tweet this because I'm sure it's valuable. Each of us secretly believes the other guy does more work. That's how this functions. Initially, we were doing it where we were outlining it together, and then one of us was writing one chapter, one of us was writing the next chapter, and we'd swap and edit the other guy's work, and then that was just the whole thing. As we have become television producers, that has gotten weirder because you can't really do that with a set. You can't say, well, I'll prep this part of the episode, you prep that part of the episode, and then we'll go correct whether the guy fucked up. It's not really a good plan. Then I answered the question. He sat there, so I think that was pretty good. Kind of like that.
I feel like you did more work on that one than he did.
It's okay. I'm not going to the signing.
There we go.
Okay, there's this phrase that we were born 1 century too late to explore Earth and 1 century too early to explore space. So according to you, which are the current projects or research or trends in space exploration that may invalidate this phrase in this century?
I know the guys who are exploring space. We hang out with the guys over at JPL and the guys who just flew probes over the surface of Jupiter. I mean, we're physically not walking on Jupiter, but we're exploring the crap out of our solar system right now. It's fascinating stuff. If you're not paying attention to what we're doing in exploration of our solar system, of our neighborhood right now, there's amazing stuff happening right now.
Yeah.
Hi, this is for everyone on the panel. And Ty kind of answered part of it, I think, just now, but I was wondering, when you're writing your story and you're trying to adhere to the laws of physics in our universe, do you have scientist acquaintances or friends or people that you kind of proof your concepts with?
I have Google. That's pretty much all I do. I mean, I know, thanks to The Martian, I've got a bunch of friends at NASA and in research and stuff like that, and I could reach out to them, but it's always just faster for me to just look something up. It's all that information's out there. Unfortunately, for space research and propulsion and all that stuff like that, most of it, it's not military secrets or anything like that. It's just like the people who have developed it are proud of it and eagerly and happily post it online. So it's all out there.
I write softer science fiction as a general rule, but I do have, a couple of scientist friends that I will run things by.
Meg engines.
And yeah, which is nice. And then you know, with Star Wars, it's not the same because, again, that's really not science. But after doing a ton of world building on my own stuff, it is sort of a relief to be able to go, hey, what would this kind of ship look like? And they're like, here are the blueprints, here's the concept art, there it is.
Yeah, the nice thing about most space exploration programs is all of their stuff is available to the public. You can just go look it up. It's not like top secret.
We pay for it.
Yeah, we pay for it, so we get to look at it.
Well, we pay for the U.S. Navy, and they won't let us see how their submarines are constructed, right? I mean, so.
I did get to walk around on a submarine.
Now, we will occasionally, if we have a particularly naughty, and it's not a question of getting information, it's a question of not being smart enough. It's like, okay, so if you're in a spaceship, it's accelerating at 2 Gs, and a thruster goes off and puts it in a spin, what does that feel like on the inside? That was actually like a 2-week conversation with several physicists to get a good mental model of what that would actually, the experience would be.
There was in the first book, there's a moment where the asteroid Eros goes up 2 degrees, and I had a friend over at the Los Alamos National Labs, a nuclear physicist, and I said, how much energy would that take? It took him a while to figure it out. I would never have been able to figure it out.
When you say goes up,
goes up in temperature 2 degrees Celsius.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Like the whole asteroid?
The whole
all
asteroid.
the way through to the core and everything?
Apparently it was a non-trivial problem.
I think Andy just got a new book idea.
No, I'm just trying to solve the problem. I mean, it depends on the composition, and...
You see? You ask people who are smart.
See?
It's like,
yeah,
I would like it to go up 2 degrees. Wow, that's really hard. Really? Okay. Then no.
That's a lot of frickin' energy.
Yes.
That's like petajoules, or what was the exponent?
You know, I don't remember.
We got a book right here. I'll look it up.
Yeah, I don't remember. And he even said this is like order of magnitude calculation here. This is not accurate to the 5th decimal.
Okay.
So my husband was on a nuclear submarine. You can ask him.
Okay.
About everything.
But he won't tell me.
Yeah, well, he's out of the service now. It doesn't matter. So
I think treason does matter even when you're out of the service.
talk to me, I'll talk to him, we'll get back to you. So my question is for Andy. Is there any interest in your Artemis book becoming a movie?
Yeah, there is. Fox has already bought the film rights. So that's pretty cool. You know, you never know if they're going to make a movie. You never know. All the stars have to align just right. But they have bought the film rights, not just the option, but actually an outright purchase. So the authors here will know what that means, and I won't take up panel time by describing the difference between an option and a purchase. But it's a pretty significant
That would be
investment.
exposition.
What's that?
That would be exposition.
That would be exposition. It would be
as you know, Andy.
As you know, James S.A. Corey A. But yeah, but there hasn't been any movement on it. Like they don't have someone writing a script or anything lined up like that.
Hi, this question is for the panelists that do a bit of world building. We tend to focus on the physics and the science limitations of why we're not doing what we're doing in the books, but when you create a world and I guess establish economic motivation, how difficult is it to finally, I guess, build a world where we want to go to space and why we want to go to space?
I think James Cameron is doing that right now.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's incredibly important. Sorry to hog the mic, but this is like the core element of Artemis is the economics of the city that's on the moon. I come up with what I consider is a decent explanation for why it's there, how it works, why people actually live there. Because I've always had a problem with that when people are like, oh, in this book there's a city on the moon. I'm like, okay, why? And they're like, oh, well, because they're mining stuff. I'm like, send robots. You don't need to send people for that. Oh, well, there's this very rare element. I'm like, robots. And it's like...
Is this unobtainium?
Yeah, right, yeah. Or even if it's unobtainium, frickin' robots to go get it. Or, oh, population pressure on Earth. I'm like, colonize Antarctica. And colonize the Sahara, colonize the ocean. It's all of that's easier than the moon. But I came up with basically it's the combination of the reduced price to low Earth orbit, making middle-class people able to afford it sort of as a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and Artemis is a tourist city. It's right next to the Apollo 11 landing site, and so that's why people go.
Yeah, for the Defy the Stars series, it's set after that economic necessity has become incredibly apparent. I mean, even more than economic. Earth is not going to be supporting life for another century, and they figured, you know, out sort of the time limits maybe a century before, and basically all resources have been pushed toward building the gates that will connect you to other systems, finding worlds that are sort of habitable. And at the time, I was like, okay, they could be really scarce. And then right after this went to press, they're like, the TRAPPIST system has 87 billion planets we can all live on, and we just found it. And I was like, great, but we're just gonna go right over that.
My question is for the people that deal with the harder near-term science fiction. It seems to be that I've worked on radiation-hardened spacecraft and aircraft, and it seems that radiation effects are almost completely ignored in the designs of that are, even if they have like some magic drug for the people, most of our electronics are stuck with like 1990s processors, and if you even older camera chips that they use on Mars, you can see radiation streaks and things. And if you've got these longer-term missions rather than Apollo, where they deliberately went at a solar minimum, you'd really have to have a lot more radiation shielding on your ships. And it seems to be like, I know maybe the ship designs aren't as cool or something like that, but how do you account for that in what you're doing, or do you just pretend it doesn't happen? Okay.
No. I mean, obviously you have to radiation harden anything you stick people in. I mean, if you have endless power, which we sort of do with the ubiquitous fusion reactors, you can turn every ship into a big Faraday cage, because you have enough energy to just do that.
And you also wind up with, I mean, one of the things we have on the ships ubiquitously in the Expanse universe is they have a machine shop, and as stuff wears out, you remake it, you reform it, you put it back on, you restock when you get to a station. I mean, it's none of these ships, at least in our universe, is static either. They all have to be maintained.
Yeah, but some of the radiation isn't electromagnetic. It's still going to penetrate an electromagnetic field.
GCRs and stuff like that. Yeah. The easiest way to say it is like, look, if something takes place like 70 years in the future, you can say an engineering solution to that has been found. Yeah. The thing in the basement that works. The thing, so it's like, I have no problem accepting without even a second thought the idea that they can find a way to make electronics and the delicate electronics be completely hardened again. Maybe it's the electronics have been micronized so small that it's like a micron across, surrounded by like 10 centimeters of lead. You know, that's fine. It's the humans that are the most delicate part of any space venture, and the easiest way is what they did, and which is just to say they've cured cancer. You know, so it's like, yeah, you're getting bombarded with radiation. You've got cancer. You no longer have cancer. Stop by in another 6 months, and I'll cure whatever cancer you have then.
Okay.
Thanks. And by the way, as a preface, I should let you know, Walter Koenig dead is trending. And apparently, it was explosive decompression. So. Well done. My question.
You can check that off your list. Oh.
Yeah, that's my bucket list. Is I've punked a panel at Comic-Con. Yeah. But something that you mentioned earlier, in terms of our future, our best chance at space. Many people now are concerned about NASA perhaps being defunded and such. And yet others think that our best hope is corporate, is capitalism. People who can find a way to monetize space would actually be our best chance of ever colonizing it. And I wanted to ask your opinion where you think, whether it's governments or corporations, are likely to be our best hope of space.
I think when we talk about NASA or corporate, we discount India and China.
Well, that's government.
Yeah, that's government, but it ain't NASA.
Well, yeah.
I think that the chance that it's either one of those by themselves is pretty slim. I think you're almost certainly going to see a hybrid of both private industry and governmental power, and I don't know that we are the only governmental power that's going to be paying attention to that. So even if NASA gets defunded, someone's getting up there.
And my take is it's all about commercial space travel. I think that's the only way forward. I think, thank you, one person. I think, for me, I think if you look at the past 60 years of space travel, you go back to 1957, you've got, the Russians put up a little ball that went beep, right? And now we've got, a 350,000 kilogram space station and international, and that's pretty cool. But it's really not that huge an improvement in the grand scheme of things. Now, then look at the first 60 years of flight, which was an entirely commercial-driven industry. From 1903, the Wright brothers managed to get a plane to go 100 feet, and in 1963, you could just get an international ticket from New York to London and on a completely safe means of air transportation. When there's enormous amounts of money at stake, companies will put enormous amounts of money into solving the engineering problems, and it gets done. And so I really think commercial is how space travel will advance.
Not that it will matter when the aliens show up and take all the technology and electricity in their bubbles.
Right, other than that.
Hello, do you remember a movie, Astronaut Farmer?
Farmer in the Sky?
Yeah,
you mean the book?
No, Astronaut Farmer, the
it's
Billy Bob
movie.
Thornton movie.
Oh, okay, no.
I think it's a very real situation because you can use it first stage from SpaceX and very cheap space suit from a lot of different space startups and fuel this rocket, and it will be cost less than house in California in general. And
so does the International Space Station.
And
I know, I just bought a house in California. I'm struggling.
Okay, and it is mean very soon we will have hundreds men, uncontrolled, maybe pirates who can steal any satellite who can invite to International Space Station. So it will be soon, but when?
I don't think
in your
that
opinion,
soon.
when it will be?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you can do that if you're as rich as, who's the Tesla guy?
Musk.
Yeah, Elon Musk, or Richard
Koenig.
Branson. Yeah. If you're as rich as those guys, you can make your own space program. But it's pretty expensive to move a kilogram into low Earth orbit. That's not a trivial thing to do.
But price less from year to year. But
that's the idea, is the commercial space industry will drive the price down and down.
But when everybody can buy it.
When everybody.
Use it spaceship and go.
In my mythology, it's about it's around the 2040s, 2050s that it gets down into commercial, like being reasonable for middle class Westerners.
Oh, you're very serious.
All right, this is going to be our last question for the panel.
Okay.
No pressure, please make it good.
No.
The eyes of the world are upon you.
Well, Jules Mao, I think of, for you guys, and so if we think about him, then Andy's right. So I think of you two as mentor from the Lensman series, and then the other question goes back to Eros and the Nauvoo. I think you guys actually went to the scientists and had them do the calculations on that, and it was really, really intense. Because whether or not the Nauvoo could actually knock Eros off.
It's really hard to deorbit something into the sun.
It's incredibly hard.
Yeah,
yeah.
You don't just give it a gentle push.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're working with TV guys, and we love them all. But there's this idea of it's going like this, and so you come and you push down, and then it goes down. It's like no, that's not. No, guys, no. You have to. Okay, and so
nah, bro.
And how. And the way that we addressed that in the book was we said, oh, there are really smart engineers on Tycho. Here's the solution they came up with. let's not talk about it too much and move on. Because we're not as smart as the engineers on Tycho. They're much smarter than we are.
It takes a lot of delta V to make something stop orbiting.
Yes.
Right, and it's actually worse the closer you get into the sun, which was counterintuitive to me.
Right, because the velocity of orbit is so much higher.
You see, and now I know that.
It's actually, yes, we learned that.
All right, so if you have any other questions that are going to create answers that kind of make my brain hurt like that one, I hope that you will join our panelists in the autograph area at their various signings. So Claudia and Andy will be at table AA09 starting at 11:15. Nathan will be at AA19 later in the day. He'll be there at 5:15. And Daniel and Ty, also known as the multiple Jameses, will be at table AA05 at high noon. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.